Next to arrive at the Abbey was the bride's mother, Carol Middleton. Accompanying her on the short drive from the hotel where they'd been helping Catherine with her final preparations, her son, James. He had been given the honour, as perhaps a sibling at any other wedding would, of being invited to read the lesson at the service. Carol's outfit won universal approval, including from James Sherwood.
Carol Middleton made a very astute choice. She's wearing Catherine Walker, a great favourite of the late Diana, Princess of Wales. She also chose this wonderful powdery blue, which is genius because you know that the senior members of the royal family have to wear colour blocks. You don't compete with it. You know, you have to take a step back. And in the case of the Middletons, I think they were absolutely pitch perfect in the way that they dressed and the way they behaved at the wedding. As well as, I think, doing a remarkable job reading the lesson at the wedding, James Middleton looked simply immaculate. That was terrific tailoring, courtesy of Eden Ravenscroft, the oldest tailor on Savile Row.
At Buckingham Palace, the crowds were warming up for their end of the spectacle. It began in rather a humble way, with a fleet of rented minibuses to transport all but the most senior members of the family. It's not the first time buses have been used. They were hired in for Charles and Camilla's nuptials. It was all part of a conscious effort to minimise security and keep costs down. But the buses were also a sign of the times as the monarchy embraces the 21st century. The crowds cheered as the convoy made its way to the Abbey, and most of the family looked amused to have arrived by a rather novel mode of royal transport. For a woman who was once an air stewardess and is certainly not used to rubbing shoulders with kings and queens, Carol Middleton showed surprisingly few signs of nerves. She was a model of elegance and composure as she made her way to her place in the abbey. But her thoughts must surely have been with her daughter, who was about to step out of ordinary life for good and into a world only a very select few can ever experience.
We can see Lady Helen Taylor and her husband Tim Taylor, the art dealer, she wearing a rather beautiful blue coat embroidered on the hem. And it's a rather nice and rare sight to see the Duchess of Kent wearing a very powdery pink, demure and incredibly appropriate outfit for a royal wedding.
The Gloucesters were just behind them. Princess Michael of Kent, Princess Alexandra with her son James Ogilvy. Among the younger generation of royals, Zara Phillips with her fiancé Mike Tyndall. Theirs will be the next royal wedding.
And Lady Sarah Chatto, the daughter of the late Princess Margaret, is arguably the best dressed at the royal wedding, wearing a ripplingly simple flying saucer hat. Lady Sophie Windsor, wearing a very severely chic midnight blue suit with the flying saucer hat worn to an angle, which is important when you're a member of the royal family because you have to be seen.
Peter Phillips and his wife Autumn. Meanwhile, at Clarence House, the crowds were craning their necks to get a good view of the gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom 4 that was taking Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall to the wedding. It was 6 years since their own marriage at Windsor Guildhall. This was a day for a father's pride to swell, as he and Camilla saw for themselves the sheer number of well-wishers, now standing 20 deep, who'd come to celebrate with William.
The Prince of Wales, so his tailors reliably informed me, had put on a little bit of muscle for the wedding, so he couldn't wear his Admiral's full-dress uniform. And Malcolm Plews, who's the head cutter of Welsh and Jeffreys, one of the greatest tailors on the row, recut his uniform, the Admiral's full dress, within about 4 or 5 days, which is a record, and then recycled the gold lace from the uniform and trimmed the new uniform with it. This is very interesting because the royal family are known to recycle fashion on a fairly regular basis. Princess Anne is famous for it.
But it was the rather individual fashion taste of Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie which drew more comment than almost anything else. The girls arrived with their father, the Duke of York, closely followed by the Earl and Countess of Wessex.
I do think the Duke of York's daughters were rather unkindly criticised considering their age. It's terribly difficult to wear formal day dress when you're a girl in her teens or early 20s. And these girls obviously want to dress like young girls. They want to have fun with fashion. And unfortunately, they probably won't be able to if every time they want to experiment with a mad Philip Tracy hat or a, in Princess Eugenie's case, a Vivienne Westwood dress, they get the world's press at them. And actually, Princess Beatrice is wearing a rather marvellous nude-coloured Valentino couture coat. I mean, it's a really lovely piece. The Countess of Wessex is quite simply the best-dressed member of the royal family. You can see the champagne silk suit that's very 1950s. It's elaborate, but it doesn't shout at you. And then she supports a new milliner called Jane Taylor. Princess Anne has always been a maverick. She's a horsewoman, she's a hard-working woman. I think she might mildly enjoy fashion, but she dresses more as a royal should dress rather than as a fashion plate. So you will never see her looking inappropriate. She might make interesting choices occasionally, but it is always in the spirit of dressing as a senior member of the royal family.
At Buckingham Palace, the departure of the Queen and Duke. Her chosen colour for this spring day, primrose yellow.
And the Queen wore a dazzling primrose yellow coat dress designed by Angela Kelly. Mrs. Kelly is the Queen's dresser, personal assistant and curator of dress and jewellery. She's the first lady to ever be appointed a personal assistant to the Queen. And many of the Queen's dresses and ensembles have been commissioned in-house. We're told that they're in-house palace designs. So this includes the hats as well as the dresses and coat dresses. The three-strand pearl necklace that the Queen wears and invariably does wear when she's wearing formal day dress was given to her by her grandfather George V in 1935 to celebrate his silver jubilee.
At the Abbey, Prince Charles and the Duchess were given a warm welcome by the crowds. Camilla looked a little nervous, but her elegant costume was voted a winner.
And the Duchess of Cornwall is looking increasingly like a Queen consort. She's wearing an Anna Valentine coat and dress in a very sort of simple silk, but look at the incredible embroidery, the beautiful work, but it yet doesn't overwhelm and it doesn't shout, "Look at me." It's the perfect dress for the stepmother of the bridegroom. And Philip Tracy shows that he can create maximum wonderful millinery with this wonderful piece with the great big broad brim upturned so you see the Duchess's face. And the Duchess of Cornwall was rather fortunate to have been loaned various pieces of jewellery from the Queen Mother's collection, and we can see one particular piece dazzling on her lapel. The brooch that the Queen's wearing is a very special and sentimental piece. It's called the Lover's Knot, though. It was set for Queen Mary, the Queen's grandmother, in the Art Nouveau style of this sinuous curve of diamonds. I mean, the Queen has possibly the most magnificent, if not precious, private jewellery collection in the world. And you'll notice that the Queen's jewellery, she always says something with it. It's entirely sentimental. If you look at her earrings, there are tiny pearl and diamond studs that were given to her by Queen Mary, her grandmother. She wears them every day of her life, unless for a state occasion such as a state dinner. She wears them every day.
On to Horse Guards Parade and the Royal Salute. The Rolls, a 1950 model which was presented to the Queen when she was Princess Elizabeth, made its way through the arch and into the tilt yard. The state trumpeter marked the departure of the Queen and Duke from Buckingham Palace. The huge crowds must have reminded them of the scenes at the Golden Jubilee celebrations 9 years earlier, when 1 million people thronged around the palace to mark the 50th anniversary of the Queen's reign. Today, though, they were proud grandparents above all else, and happy to let William and Catherine take centre stage. By now, the bridesmaids were en route. 4 little girls and 2 page boys, with Catherine's sister Pippa as maid of honour. What a day for them all. Three-year-old Grace Van Kutsen, William's goddaughter, and Camilla's granddaughter, also 3, Eliza Lopez. Behind them, the 7-year-old daughter of the Earl and Countess of Wessex, Lady Louise Windsor, and Viscount Linley's 8-year-old daughter, Margarita Armstrong-Jones. The page boys were Tom Pettifer, the son of William's former nanny, Tiggy-Leg Burke, and Billy Lowther Pinkerton, the son of William's private secretary. A fanfare from the state trumpeters of the Household Cavalry marked the Queen's arrival at the Abbey. A welcome from the Dean of Westminster in his magnificent gold cope. Prince Charles and his wife were there to greet the Queen and Duke. And unusually, as the father and stepmother of the bridegroom, they took their place in the procession ahead of the Queen and Duke. At the Goring Hotel, all eyes were on the specially erected porch and the Rolls-Royce Phantom that was waiting for Catherine. At 10:51, the first glimpse of the bride and that dress. The initial impression was one of great delicacy, with feminine soft layers of ivory silk trimmed with the finest lace. After weeks of speculation, the secret was out. The dress had been designed by Sarah Burton, creative director at Alexander McQueen. And she was on hand to help arrange the gown and its 9-foot train for the journey to the Abbey. Catherine's father, Michael, looked nervous and emotional as he helped her get settled.
And here we had the first glimpse of the dress that I think took the world's breath away. It was designed by Sarah Burton for the house of Alexander McQueen, and it's an incredibly poignant and important moment in British fashion because Mr. McQueen passed away last year, and one didn't know whether the house would survive or not under the stewardship of Sarah Burton, but I think we can safely say that the house is in incredibly safe hands, if not hands of a genius when you look at a dress of this quality. It was commented on that this dress bears a close resemblance to Princess Grace of Monaco's wedding dress when she married Prince Rainier. I actually think that it's better. It's very interesting to me to look at the details, that as much of it was made in England as possible. The lace work on the bodice and on the hem was made by the Royal School of Needlework, and apparently Sarah Burton set up a design studio next door to the Royal School of Needlework in Hampton Court Palace, and a lot of the fittings were executed there because obviously the designer of the dress had to be kept top secret, and it was only given away probably the night before the wedding when a very eagle-eyed fashion spotter noticed a sort of figure huddled under a fur hat dashing into the Goring Hotel and identified her from her accessories as Sarah Burton.
The crowds went wild. They loved what they could see. But we would all have to wait for the full impact of the dress until the bridal car reached Westminster. And what a journey this must have been for a young woman from a small village in Berkshire. Born a commoner, Catherine Middleton was now on her way to become a princess, a duchess, and one day, queen. As the cheers and screams sounded around her and a forest of flags were waved, she seemed for all the world born to this role. Calm, composed, and gloriously happy. She was on the way to marry the man she loves. After all the speculation, her famously glossy hair was half up and half down, and she was wearing a tiara borrowed from the Queen.
The tiara is very important and very sentimental. In fact, many of the royal jewels are very sentimental. It's called the halo tiara. It was set for the Queen Mother in 1936. It was then given to the Queen on her 18th birthday, but the Queen seldom wore it because she acceded quite shortly afterwards, and it really is the tiara of a minor princess, of a young princess, and it's exactly right and appropriate that Miss Middleton wore it as she went into the Abbey and then came out as the Duchess of Cambridge. It's almost a semaphore in diamonds for what we should be seeing of royal protocol in jewellery.
This was no doubt the time when her father, Michael, fully realised how different his daughter's life would now be from his own. She was about to become one of the most famous and important women in the world. A few moments ahead of her, the bridal party were making their way into the Abbey.
Well, we see the genius of Savile Row on display here in tailoring these absolutely immaculate Irish Guards uniforms that were designed in-house by the palace but made by Cashcots of Savile Row.
Pippa Middleton led the two youngest bridesmaids by the hand.
And we certainly saw a true star emerge at the royal wedding in the shape and what a shape of Pippa Middleton, the sister of the Duchess of Cambridge, in that incredibly slinky Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen dress, cut on the bias, more reminiscent actually of John Galliano than the late Alexander McQueen, but quite a corker. I mean, we understand from the world's press that websites were set up almost instantly. Twitter went crazy, praising what one would call her rather voluptuous figure, shown off to such a great extent. I mean, one would add that a bride would be rather brave to allow a maid of honour to potentially outshine her at a wedding, royal or otherwise. In this case, nothing could outshine the Duchess of Cambridge. But Pippa Middleton has become a huge international star. I think it's quite smart in a way for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge to allow some of the attention to move over to the Middleton, to allow them to shine too, because it takes the attention away from the new Duke and Duchess, and they may have the privacy that they've actually said that they crave.
Meanwhile, the bridal car was approaching Horse Guards. There was no royal salute here, of course, because Catherine was not yet a member of the royal family. On the return journey, it would be very different.
I did think that it was a very brave choice to use McQueen, because he is known to have a very gothic, very dark side. The house has that reputation for being quite black and quite sombre. So for a wedding it wasn't the most obvious choice, but McQueen also had a romanticism in his soul, I believe. And I think Sarah Burton understood that, and when she took over from the late Alexander McQueen, I think she's brought out more of the romanticism.
Along Whitehall, the crowds were more numerous and vocal than ever. But nothing was going to faze this young bride. At a few seconds past 11 o'clock, the car drew up outside the Abbey. The Dean was there to welcome her, and Pippa, maid of honour for the day, came to help her sister. And this was the first chance for the crowds at Westminster and the television audience around the world to admire the wedding gown. Catherine's bouquet was designed to complement her gown, and it was full of meaning. The lily of the valley signify happiness. The sweet William, not only her husband-to-be, but gallantry. Hyacinth represent constancy and love, and ivy, fidelity. There was also a traditional stem of myrtle, the emblem of marriage, from a plant grown by Queen Victoria, and a sprig from the myrtle plant used in the Queen's wedding bouquet in 1947.